Harry's book Spare caused a stir, and let's talk about it. Guys, how have you guys been? Happy New Year. Yes, I can still say Happy New Year. It's the 13th right now, probably uploading this on the 14th. Happy New Year, guys. Yes, I've been gone. Took a 1 month break. Well, from this YouTube channel, I've been working. And I have something that I'm releasing soon, so stay tuned for that. Very special announcement. But I want to talk about Harry's new book, Spare. And guess what? You guys already know how I feel about Harry and Meghan. If you don't, you can watch the last video I posted on this channel. 1 hour long talking about Harry and Meghan. I also have another channel called Brand Video Pro. And I also made, I believe, I've pretty much made 3 hours of content giving you guys my opinion on Harry and Meghan. So, hey, and as I've shown in my content, I did support them watching the Netflix documentary, reviewing it. I have supported Harry and Meghan. Now, this book, I've read the book. Well, actually listened to it on Audible. 15 hours or so long. Great, rich content. I'm going to give you my thoughts on this. But before I get into that, you guys know I was supporting Harry and Meghan. Then about a week ago, Harry starts doing these interviews. And in these interviews, he's regurgitating the same thing that he said in the Netflix documentary. And to me, it's like, whoa, this is like Harry and Meghan fatigue. You've already told us this so many times. You told us this in the Oprah interview. You told us this in the Netflix series. And now you're still saying the same thing over and over again. At this point, I was fed up. I was annoyed. I was irritated. I went on these rants on my Instagram. You guys follow me on my Instagram. I am Kenim on Instagram. Went on these rants on my Instagram, bashing Harry, because it's like, bro, at this point, we've heard it, and it's kind of like you're just attention seeking. You know, you already got 100 or so million from the Netflix deal. You got, millions. He has so many deals. He's gotten so much money. So to me, I was like, bro, why are you still talking about this? Why are you still talking about this? We're bored. And I just kind of felt like, look, it's the work of talentless people to keep coming out. Because like when people come out with content, like I'm in the entertainment industry, I'm in the media game. And when you look at the people that are revered or respected, the Beyoncés, the Michelle Obamas, all those people, they only come out for interviews when they're displaying a body of work that is strong. And not to say Harry didn't do that, but on the surface, it's like, okay, you did the Oprah interview. You talked about this same subject. You did the Netflix series. You talked about the same subject. Now you're doing these interviews again, and you're still saying the same thing you said 2 years ago. Come on. So that's like how I was just like, this is like overdone. It's annoying. And now I started taking the side of the, mass media, how everyone has been bashing him. I legitimately started taking everyone's side, because now I can see why people are just so irritated with this person that just keeps whinging about the same thing. It's like, bro, we're tired. And I really felt as though, working in entertainment, working in media, like surely their publicists must have had the foresight to know that them coming out again through doing 3 bodies of work, the Oprah interview, which I think was like 2 hours long, doing the Netflix docuseries, which was like 6 hours long, and then coming out with this 15-hour book. Surely they must have known that that's just too much content about the same thing. That's the way that I took it. Surely they knew that. And I will say that I came to that conclusion based on the way that the world has been taught to look at the royal family, the British royal family, as the pinnacle of not just white supremacy, but of the world. We put them on a pedestal. And so now let me give you my analysis on this book, because the first thing that I can break down about Harry in this book is that he's not only demystifying that, he's rejecting that pedestal that we put him on. And he's saying, I'm just a regular Tom, Dick, or Harry. Literally. This is kind of like what he's trying to give us in the book. So once I think it was even like by the time I was halfway through the book, I understood that, okay, I put him on this pedestal, a pedestal that I would compare to Beyonce, to Michelle Obama, because as Black people, we don't necessarily look at the Queen and think, oh, at least Black Americans, Black people in America, yes, in Africa, people still look at the Queen and put her on a pedestal, but I think it's been popularized that we kind of look up to, we have more respect for, Beyonce, who her prestige and her pedestalization has been built on pure quality talent, whereas the British royal family, theirs was built on white supremacy and destruction of colonization, the destruction of the world. So there's a lack of respect that is now being passed on to the royal family. But when it comes down to it, we all sort of like, okay, well, the people that we respect as Black people, it's Beyonce, it's Michelle Obama, it's Barack Obama. We have these Black figures that we look up to. So, for me, when I was looking at him and what he could do with his career now, he could walk in the same path as a Michelle Obama, walking the same path as a Beyonce. And when you look at or an Oprah Winfrey, it was strategic that they went and they did an Oprah Winfrey interview to align themselves with Oprah Winfrey and to align themselves with American royalty, right? He's done projects with Michelle Obama. He's done these things. So he's very strategically aligned himself with American royalty, even before he left the royal family. So that was my expectation of him. And if you're going to align yourself with American royalty, when you come out with PR, you have to come out with a body of work that is a piece of art, that is quality, and that is not you whinging or you regurgitating the same information. Beyonce is never going to keep, you don't hear from Beyonce unless she's dropping an album or she's dropping a new, like, what was that, vegan, a new brand, right? You're not going to hear from Beyonce. You're not going to hear from Michelle Obama unless she's dropping a new book. But with Harry, it's like, okay, sure, you're dropping a new book, but the context of the book is regurgitated information. We don't want to hear from you anymore. We're tired. Meghan and Harry fatigue. So that was my perspective going into the book. But I knew that I was going to listen to the book anyway. I'm nosy. And of course, I have to give you guys my take. So of course, I was going to read the book anyway. So I go ahead and I read the book. And in reading the book, the first thing that Harry does is that he showcases how he's a normal Tom, Dick, or Harry. He's a normal kid. And he almost makes this effort to demystify the pedestal that the royals put on us or put on him, or they imposed on him. Not just the royal family, but the British media have imposed on him since he was born. There's this pedestal that they've imposed on them. So he exemplifies this by talking about how even the women that he had dated, even before Meghan, were scrutinized and questioned. Are they worthy of a royal prince? Are they commoners? Are they trashy? I think he referenced one time making out with like a page 6 topless girl, and how the media or the press just went at him for like, this is like, basically not worthy of him. So he's consistently gone through this all his life. And I just see him rejecting that pedestal. And it reminds me of when you watch the Justin Bieber documentary that he did on YouTube. I think it was called Changes. Go look the YouTube documentary series that he did. He kind of talked about how the world kind of put him on a pedestal, and he didn't ask for people to put him on a pedestal. That's what Justin Bieber was complaining about. And then putting him on this pedestal, there's a lot of pressure for him to live up to that. And the thing about Justin saying that is that it's understood, because let's face it, Justin Bieber is my favorite musician, hands down. But let's face it, he doesn't have the Beyonce talent. He doesn't even have the Chris Brown talent. He doesn't even have the Michael Jackson talent. But the world still put him on a pedestal bigger than Chris Brown. I stopped there. I didn't say Beyonce. I didn't say Michael Jackson. But let's say maybe in the same realm as Beyonce. The world put him on that pedestal. He didn't ask for that pedestal. But the thing about Justin Bieber saying that is that he actually did work for his career. He actually did craft his career to be in the place that he's in. He worked for that. And whether maybe he didn't put himself on that pedestal, but Scooter Braun, his manager, put him on that pedestal by aligning him with Michael Jackson. Scooter Braun legitimately says, or literally says, that he wanted to create a white Michael Jackson. He said that. So it was intentional, but as far as Justin is concerned, he didn't put himself on that pedestal. We did. But ultimately, Justin still worked for that. Harry didn't work for it. Harry never chose this life. Harry was just born into it. He did not choose this. He was just born into it. And from that, it's like, not only was he born into this pedestalization, he was born into the terrible things that come with it. And in this book, he's trying to demystify that and show us that he's just a regular person. And the way he does that is, when he describes his life of like when he was in the military and he was like flying those planes and pissing in a bag, or like when he was like at sea at one point and he whipped out his penis to pee. That was the day he met Meghan. Or like there's so many references. Or like when he was in the military and someone spat in his face in an exercise that they were doing. He talks of, or like him going discount shopping, like all his clothes, he never used to go to expensive places to buy his clothes, which is like funny because you would think that he would be one of those people that go to those expensive stores that even though the clothes would be no brand, it would be like a t-shirt that's like white, but it's like $700. You would just think a prince would do that. But he said no, he would go to like the cheapest store, go to the sales rack and get stuff that was like off season or from last season. That's how he kind of went by shopping. So he does. And the funny thing is, I believe they used to say Diana used to, don't quote me on this, but I remember back in the day, there was a reference to how Diana would buy costume jewelry. So maybe he learned a lot of this stuff from his mom, or just the essence of his mom just being so human and so normal. There's a lot of that in him. So in this story, he really tries to demystify that. But most importantly, he really shows how he's not classist and he doesn't support classism. And when I see him in that light of him not supporting classism, and then I understand that perhaps like he wasn't trying to align himself with Michelle Obama. He wasn't trying to align himself with Beyonce. He doesn't want to align himself. And it's so funny to some people, that'll be funny. Why are you bringing Beyonce and Michelle Obama? But I explained it earlier. He doesn't want to align himself with that. He just wants to be Harry. He just wants to be a basic English man who moved to the US and married an American actress. He wants to be a basic Tom, Dick, or Harry, right? And when you look at it from that perspective, well, okay, then yeah, you could be a reality TV star. Go ahead, do that. But it's almost like he wants to have his cake and eat it too. Because you want to be this regular person, but regular people don't get $100 million for a Netflix deal. Regular people don't get $30 million, $30 million for a book deal. Apparently his book sold his book sold 1.4 or something million in the first day or something crazy. The opening, which is like a record for Penguin. So that's insane. Regular people don't have this. And yes, he's argued, I know in the book he mentioned how when he tried to get the annual security costs that he would need, they quoted $6 million. And therefore it's almost like he's using style to insinuate that this $100 million won't really go far because he has to pay for security for his family, and that security for his family barely pays for his lifestyle. And that lifestyle is due to the fact that he didn't choose to be royal, but he's royal and he has to secure himself. So that was one component that I thought was funny. Okay, his security is expensive. Is $6 million dollars a year. And so this $130+ million that I have isn't going to last that long. I'm not buying it. Your security is not going to be 6 million. He got a quote that said 6 million a year. They couldn't afford it, and then they hung up. But there's so many ways that he kind of insinuates the difficulties that he's had. So that's the first thing that stood out to me. Another thing, this book, a lot of revelations, a lot of interesting things. One of the strongest, most powerful things I'm gonna get to his dicey relationship with William, because that was just sort of like palpable throughout the story. But aside from that, and like if you look at that, when you think about the lack of having a mother in the household, and the lack of having a woman's love, a woman's touch in their households, really shaped the coldness between him, his father, and his brother. Right? There's just lack of his mother's love or a woman's love. Like I kid you not, if he had a sister, there would have been more love in that family. And so it's clear that, so I feel like online there's a lot of conversation about how single mothers are terrible, especially in the manosphere. They talk about how single mothers are terrible and whatnot. And they talk about, and then people have sent me content that says like, if a father is in a kid's life, the kid is more successful, but it doesn't make a difference if the mother is in the kid's life. And I don't think that's true at all. I think it's very important to have both parents in the household. And because of the lack of having both parents in the household, for them is kind of resulted in this sort of like broken family unit, because they were not attached with love. And people could say Camilla, okay, he had a stepmom, but Camilla came later on, and Camilla, I don't get the essence that she's a loving person, or was that for him. You know, he did talk about her in the book. He did say some things about her in the book, and we'll get to that. The betrayal in the family. So there's a lack of a woman's love in the family. And that was also quite palpable. Right? Another thing was Charles as a father. And it was so let me talk about sort of the relationship dynamics between him and Charles, and then him and William. That's the elephant in the room. And the thing about him and Charles is it kind of was this relationship that was a paradox. The way he describes his relationship with his father, it's this paradox. On one hand, he has this father that, you know, always calls him darling boy, which is such an endearing, loving term, like the way his father would always call him darling boy. And also his father is kind of in competition, not with him, but with William. And that's kind of been a theme all their life. But Harry was never a threat to the father because he's a spare. And so because he was the spare, it seems as though he got more love from his father than William did. And I'm going to get to that. That will definitely add to William's dynamic with Harry. But it seems as though he still got more love from his dad. And by love, no, his father was not a hugger. They're not huggers. Yes, they do kiss on the cheek. They're not huggers. And his father was distant, you know, but he was there. He had a presence. So the father's impact is that he was present, and which is more than a lot of people can say. So I don't know if you guys watched the video of Akon saying like, who fathers don't go to recitals. Who does that? That's for white people. Well, Harry's father attended his recitals. You know, he was there. He took him on outings. You know, he was around, he was present. He gave him advice. He was there for him. He was present. And in this book, he doesn't attack his father when it comes to the love that he received from his father, even though he never articulated it in that way. And maybe he didn't even understand it fully, But it was clear that his dad was present and his dad was there for him. And I don't know if, and I could almost say that not just there physically, but also there emotionally. In some ways that a lot of fathers aren't even there for their kids, and he was definitely there to give him advice. Now, the con, and what makes it a paradox, is his father would often throw him under the bus. Not him specifically, but him and William under the bus to win the court of public opinion, to win over the press, so that the press would not write terrible things about him. So he talks about how, because of Camilla, she was kind of this villain, this third person in Charles's marriage. So there was this effort that Camilla had to, rectify her image in the public. And because of this, her and Charles, when they were married, worked together to kind of fix that image. And because of that, it's almost like Charles wanting to sort of repair the image of the future Queen of England and his wife. He kind of like allowed the press, release false information about Harry, especially like lies about him cheating on his A-levels. They said the art teacher claimed that he cheated on his A-levels. They claimed that he was a drug addict and he came in and out of rehab, which was a lie. There's so many moments where the press just kind of like obliterated him. And it happened around when he went to Eton, and it was like, they gave him a few years after his mom died. But when Camilla kind of came into the picture and she was trying to sort of like win over the public as a future queen, that's when shit hit the fan. That's when his dad started sacrificing his son's image, specifically Harry, because Harry was an easy target. He started sacrificing Harry's image for Camilla's benefit. He kind of allowed that to happen. And that was the betrayal that Harry received from his father. But the complexity of it is, on one side, Charles is his dad, but on the other side, Charles is also his boss. And that's where the relationship is a little contentious because of that dynamic. And he talks about it, the institution versus the family. And because you're born into this institution, that conflict of working with your family just kind of exists throughout your life. So a lot of when Harry in interviews talks about the institution, he's actually talking about his father allowing the institution to happen. And I'm going to talk about those dynamics and how it's interesting from Charles's perspective. But he's never really talking about William. His issue with William is separate, and I'm going to address that too. But Charles kind of threw both of them under the bus for his image. Now, you have to understand where Charles is coming from. Now, Charles has been an heir all his life. The press don't come for the queen. Have you guys noticed? Like, I think sometimes they will. Like, back in the day when she was younger, they would come for her a little bit, when she was young and pretty. But as of like, I don't know, probably since Diana days, I can't tell you when, they stopped coming for the queen at some point. And if you ask me, the way the whole dynamic is, everybody has their person, their press secretary or their press team, and the press teams fight or work against each other to throw each other under the bus. So if you ask me, the queen's person, who is actually the guy that actually, he referred to one of them as the bee, the wasp, and I can't remember the other one. These are the queen's people. And these guys are the most vicious. And they're the ones that actually kicked Harry out of the family or out of the institution. They're the ones, right? But Charles also has his people. It's so interesting. And William has his person and Harry has his person, or people. Before, William and Harry's office were united, but then they split up at some point when he married Meghan. But the queen has her people, right? And her people, think about how much her people threw Charles under the bus throughout his life. Now, it's said that we've seen, if you guys have watched The Crown, if you guys have watched kind of any of this stuff around or paid attention, it seems as though, and Harry also talks about this too, Charles kind of grew up in this loveless, I would say loveless, but he wasn't, the queen is not affectionate. She's not the mother that hugs and kisses you and all sorts of stuff. Like Harry even mentions, it was so interesting to me how much of the crown is actually true, because he kind of confirmed a lot of things in the crown. But he talks about how like nobody hugs the queen. She doesn't hug anyone, and she never hugged Charles. So this dynamic, imagine not getting love from your mother. That's probably like the worst. I think that's the biggest punishment anyone can receive. Like not getting love from your mother, like not getting love from your father. Like that's painful. It sucks, but not getting love from your mother, that's a different dynamic of sucky. That's a different level of sucky. So it seems as though Charles just didn't get love from his mom. And it seems as though because he was the heir, that dynamic, his mother probably threw him under the bus for her own, to maintain her respect as a sovereign. And now, like Charles, he in these Oprah interviews, he's kind of given us some examples. So Charles now says like, hey, this happened to me, so it has to happen to you. So it seems as though he just kind of threw them under the bus. So the relationship with Charles is a paradox. On one hand, he's this loving, present father, and he's not overtly loving, but he's loving in terms of he gives advice, he listens to him talk about his woes and his issues that happen in life. He's there for him. He gives him, and he calls him darling boy, which is so endearing, but at the same time, Charles would throw him under the bus. So on one side, his father, Charles, is a loving father, but his boss, Charles, is this vicious kind of like savage parent. And he kind of has to look at this person who betrayed him as a father and kind of like fight that dynamic. Now, let's get on to his relationship with William. But before we talk about his relationship to William, I want to address his relationship, Charles's relationship with William. He doesn't go too deep into it, but it's very clear that Charles has betrayed William so much more. Right, so there's a lot of pressure being the heir, and that was kind of why the queen, if you even watch The Crown, she puts so much pressure on Charles, and it just seems as though the queen not only puts that pressure on William, Charles also puts that pressure on William, and so William is dealing with this like dicey situation whereby he's the heir, so he's restricted from doing so much that he wants to do, right? And he's told that he's the heir, so he has this power and he has this importance and all of these things. But on the flip side, he doesn't get to benefit from being the sovereign. He doesn't get the respect of being the sovereign. He doesn't get the advantages of being he doesn't get the advantages that you would get of being the sovereign. Because when it comes down to it, Harry is like, if you look at every family, the last born is always going to be the one that's the most spoiled. Even me. My sisters are twins. On their birthday, I would get a cake. On their birthday, I get a cake. On my birthday, only I get a cake. You know what I'm saying? So like, as a last born, you're going to be spoiled. So with William, it's not just this idea that Harry is just the last born, and so he's getting spoiled in those ways that lastborns get spoiled. Then he lost his mom, and think about it. They're going to empathize with Harry more than they would with William, because William, oh, you were 15. Oh, okay, you're. But with Harry, he would be babied and he would be cuddled a lot more, right? There's so many dynamics. But in addition to that, he's now the heir. William is the heir. So there's this added business pressure that's placed on him since he was a baby. And then he gets to look out at Harry, who's free. It's so interesting. who's free and can roam around, go and join the military, get rankings in the military, go start Invictus games, go do all these like things and be accomplished, go do all of these things, you know, get revered, get respect, go get a book deal with Netflix, go get 100 million here. He just watches his brother do all these things, and there's this level of jealousy. So throughout the book, Harry keeps talking about this sibling rivalry that is pressure that comes from William. This pressure that comes from this jealousy that comes from William. And I just know a lot about sibling dynamics. First of all, with when there are only 2 kids in the household, when there are 3 kids in the household, there's balance. Because, you know, there's a balance with the 3rd kid. There's this dynamic where if 2 people fight, the whole house isn't broken because you're going to be talking to the middle child. You know, both of you are still going to talk to the middle child, and the middle child is still going to talk to you. So eventually the 3 of you will talk, right? So when it's like that sibling dynamic where there's 3 or more, but when there's 2, it's like hot and cold. If I'm not talking to you, hey, we're not talking. And we don't have to unite. Then in addition to that, they're boys. Right? They are boys. I think about Logan Paul and Jake Paul when they had that sibling fight, and it's so easy, you know, for them to just get so toxic, especially because they're in the public, you know, eye, everyone's watching them. There's just so many dynamics to that just creates this like elevated tension. Then in addition to that, there is no mother. So there's no sibling around, no mother, no woman around to unite them. And Camilla doesn't have that power because she's a stepmother. She doesn't have that position with them. She came in, you know, when William was like 17 and Harry was like 15. They were older. So she doesn't have that dynamic to influence them in that way. So the 2 of them fighting is understandable. So that's giving you William's perspective, which is funny because throughout the book, you really get pained by Harry's perspective, because as much as I said all these things about William, Harry is the spare. You know, Harry is the spare. And I saw like, I think a New York Post article talking about how he was born to give spare parts to William. He didn't say that in the book. That's not what he said. He just said he was the spare, right? He was the spare. You know, if I could find the quote, but you guys can find it online. But he just said, look, I was the spare kid, so I was not important. And it was he was made known of that throughout his life. And that can really mess you up. You know, that can really mess you up. And a lot of people are shocked about this, but this is like historic. This happens in royal families since time. So this is not a new concept of being a spare and being less important, because that's from a business angle. It's kind of like, who's more important in a business, the CEO or I don't know, whoever is beneath the CEO? Who's more important? Obviously the CEO is more important. Who's more important, the heir or the spare? Of course the heir is more important, but there are pros and cons that come with both. And for Harry, he experienced both of the pros and cons that happened, but he almost internalized it. So I'll give you an example. He was allowed, funny enough, I didn't realize that he was allowed to work in Afghanistan, and he was allowed, like he was actually, like I know I saw pictures of him in Afghanistan and stuff like that back in those days, but I thought it was just like you know, a photo shoot. I didn't think it was real. But this kid was legit in Afghanistan fighting the war, potentially killing himself. And that's insane. I did not know that, you know. And so that I gave him some respect. And I'm going to talk about him as a person, that how he's depicted in the book. But I have some respect for him because of that. But stuff like Afghanistan, William was just not allowed. And that was another issue why William was jealous of him. Because it was like, you're technically ranked higher than me because you have this, like, I think I don't know what position he got up to, but he got quite a high position in the military. And technically that means that you're more ranked than me, which made William upset because I'm supposed to be the heir. I'm supposed to be king. So it's so interesting. There's so many moments of, you know, when he started the Invictus games. So after leaving the military, I think he found out about these games called the Warrior Games in America, which is like people that veterans that were disabled kind of did their own Olympic type style like sports games. So he starts the Invictus Games, and because he did a royal trip to America, he actually met Michelle Obama and Barack Obama. So he got to partner with, you know, Michelle Obama and Barack Obama, and he holds this Invictus Games, you know, in the UK. He has the Queen do all this. So he is very accomplished, and this type of thing is going to make William jealous because, you know, how dare you? So there were so many layers of William's jealousy. And I think if anybody was affected most by not having a loving mother, it is William. He's the one that suffered most from it, if you ask me, because all of this jealousy, because like, you know, when you're the one that's being jealous, like someone's jealous of you, you don't understand, like, why do you hate me? Like, I'm good. Like, if anything, I'm the one that should hate you. You're the heir. You know, you have all these accomplishments, you have all these things. And the way Harry saw it was like, at one point he talks about how he was still living with his dad and Camilla. He was like 28. And he started this Invictus Games, or, you know, he did something, I don't know what it was. And William was there being jealous of him. But at that point, William was already married. He had his own household. I think he already had a kid. You know, he had all these things, you know, and it was like, why are you even jealous of me? And the funny thing about all of that is what I've noticed being around very successful people is that not all, but there are a certain type of successful person that they're jealous of even the ants in the room. They're jealous of people's potential, and they want to diminish it. And it's a very gross characteristic. But I remember even someone like Gary Vaynerchuk, who seems to be extremely generous, you know, he talks about how he doesn't want his kids to be more successful than him. God forbid. Like, there's a video that he says that. So this is a thing, like there are a good amount of successful people that even if you're like so beneath them that you have no chance, of getting to their level, they're still jealous of you. And that's just the characteristic that William exhibits. And to me, he has a lot of internalized issues that he hasn't dealt with. He's unhealed, he's toxic, he's all these things that he hasn't dealt with it. Like, there was another thing, for example, when Harry, a lot of dynamics in the family are just crazy. Like, Harry had to get permission to wed Meghan. He had to ask the Queen. Another thing was, technically he was supposed to get rid of his beard. He asked the Queen if he had, he had to ask the Queen for stuff like that. So he didn't want to get rid of his beard for his wedding. So he asked the Queen, and she said, sure. And I think he mentioned it to Dad. His dad was fine. But when he told Harry was so jealous because Harry had to, you know, he had to cut off his beard. You know, they forced him to cut off his beard for his wedding. So he was just so jealous that Harry could keep his beard because, hey, the beard makes him look handsome. And when you think about it, you know, William used to be this like gorgeous, beautiful boy when he was younger. You know, gorgeous, beautiful, up until like maybe his mid-20s, he was so handsome. Then when he started when he started balding, he started getting less attractive, which, funny enough, if he just got a beard, he would be just as handsome. He still has it in him. But it just appears now like Harry is like the more handsome one. And part of what makes Harry more handsome is his beard. So there's this, it's just so petty, but it's like he didn't want him to have the beard. So he kept threatening him, or he kept saying, no, you have to cut it off. No, you have to cut it off. Then he said, I invoke my right as the heir and I demand that you cut it off. Like, it got there. And Harry was like, no, I got permission from the Queen of England that I don't have to cut off my beard. Why would I? No, you're not even the next guy in line. You're the second. You're third or second in line. What are you talking about? No, I'm not cutting off my beard. So they had this dynamic. So it's all these like petty little things that William just kept being jealous of him and kept coming for him, down to the point where he talks about William like fighting him. I can't remember what they were arguing about. It was something about Meghan. But it was all so petty. And I was just like, wow, like, it's so toxic. This is an environment that he has to leave. He can't be in this environment. It's so freaking toxic. Extremely toxic family dynamic. It's awful. And there were so many levels of that, so many layers of that, and just learning how he and William were just not even close from childhood, which was so shocking. Like, you know, I'm not saying all the popular things that you've already seen in the press that he's covered in interviews, but he basically talks about how from the day he went to Eden, William was like, you don't know me here. So he just kind of like ignored him. And that was kind of their dynamic all the way till now, of just kind of like just being cold and William just being this hater. Like, I remember at one point, it was so funny because Harry was being pressured to marry when he was like 30 and unmarried. I was so shocked to hear that a 30-year-old man is being told, like, they compared him to Bridget Jones. Why can't you marry? And he was like eager to get married and looking for the one, which is so interesting that a man would have to experience that. But he had that experience. And William looks him in the eye and says, you know, it might never happen. Wow. These are the kind of people in your life that you should never be around. These are the types of people that are so toxic that you should never be around. So William's toxicity is extremely exhausting, and it's clear that he's dealing with some internal issues of his own, and it's kind of like he needs to get therapy and figure out what his issue is. I'm trying to see any other interesting things that I got out of this. Ooh, this is a big one. The Taliban and the media's perception. So it was so funny because somebody accused me because I went from that transition of supporting them to just being offended by the content that they were the regurgitation of information. You know, I went on this like rant or outburst on my Instagram, and then I read the book and I was like, oh no, I sympathize with him, I understand. And then some people were accusing me of like, oh, you just buy into what the media say. I think if anybody watches this channel, you know that I don't buy into what the media say. I come up with my own conclusions and I analyze things myself. But one thing that was easy to fall into the trap of the media, because at the end of the day, we're all the products of our environment and we're all susceptible to the media. And that was kind of the point of his story. He admitted how, as much as he hates the media, he was obsessed with it and he was obsessed with reading it. He was very conscious of what was being said about him, obsessive even. And you could even sense that watching the Netflix documentary, that he was obsessed kind of like with what the media says. He's quoting things that were said. It was crazy. But one of the things that they talked about was the Taliban. And this was a very interesting, dangerous conversation that was being had around the Taliban. And it was the fact that they had said, he admits that he killed 25 people. Now, he later went on a late show and explained why he said that number. And it was because there's a shame that comes with being a veteran and how many people you killed. And he said that number. And a lot of people commit suicide, veterans. So he said that number to remove the shame, but he wasn't proud of it. He wasn't boasting about it, but he wasn't proud or boasting, but he wasn't ashamed either. And that was why he released this number. But the press took that information and they started spewing this narrative that he's put the royal family at danger. There might be somebody inspired by the Taliban and blow up, the coronation. He's put the British public at danger and he's put himself at danger, this, that. And that is all bull crap. And let me explain. So in the story, he talks, a good chunk of the story is about his tours in Afghanistan. And every single time he went there, he was the prime target, that he was always a target. And they even broke into the housing quarters one time. They broke in to try and get him. So he's always been the target. So the reason that he was always the target, and the reason I think 3 times on 3 occasions, because the media outed him for being in Afghanistan. So the press are even responsible for this in the first place. So they're the ones that outed him in the press saying, oh, Harry's in Afghanistan right now, blah, blah, blah. And that's what alerted the Taliban. And then they were like, oh, we have to get him. He's our head honcho. We have to get him. He's our prime target. But this is the irony of it all. even with all of that, so even with all of that, the Taliban were not able to get him, number one. Number two, even when he was in Afghanistan, he talks about how the Taliban didn't even have the airplanes so the American or Western military or NATO dominated the airspace during the Afghanistan war. So that is in Afghanistan, in their own country. They didn't dominate the airspace. It was the Americans that dominated the airspace. So if they couldn't even dominate when they were, when they were at war in their own country, how do you think they're going to get on a plane and dominate British airspace? How do you think they're going to get away with doing that? They won't. They just don't have that power. And then let's also remember how the US came out of Afghanistan just 2020. Was it 2021 or I can't remember. It was like last year. It was like 2021, and there was like this hysteria around like, oh my God, blah blah blah. The US came out of Afghanistan. They barely have taken the Western armies have dominated Afghanistan, and they left finally. They took all their troops took all their boots off of the ground because they had the power to do that. Now they beat them. I can't remember when the war actually ended, but so much longer. Like there's been so much time since the war ended, and American boots were on ground, right? NATO boots were still on ground. So my point is that they've dominated them in the way that they don't even have the power to come and start a new war. Why would they come and bomb the coronation and start a new war when they couldn't even win the last one? They don't have that power. So I think there's a lot of hysteria in the media and the news that's just kind of fear-mongering us and trying to add to that sort of like Harry, Meghan hatred, saying, oh, Harry was reckless by saying this. He was stupid by saying this. And people will just so easily believe this because they don't have the information or the perspective to analyze it. And that was I fell into that trap. It's so easy to fall into that trap because when it has to do with terror and fear, the media kind of dominates in that space, and you easily believe them because your natural state as a human is to be safe. So without real information and insight, you're going to believe what the media says. Oh my God, he talks about how many people he killed. This is going to put a threat to all our lives. And this is just like their way of trying to pile on the Meghan Harry hatred. But in reality, Afghanistan does not have the power. They couldn't even dominate their airspace during the war in their country. You think they're going to dominate our airspace in the West? No, they're not going to do that. They don't have the power. And that's part of what came with Harry's confidence in announcing the people that he killed. So we just have to be careful what we listen when we listen to the press, because it's fear-mongering and they're just causing hysteria just to sell papers. So many more interesting things discussed in this book. I highly recommend reading it. So many different themes. He talks about, he really hates, what's his name again? Rupert Murdoch? Yeah. The owner of all these like press things. Yeah, he hates him. Yeah, he owns all these Australian American business magnate. He owns all these like news organizations and all this press. He hates him. He comes for him and he keeps coming for him. And it's clear that his dad must have been complaining about him his whole life. And because you don't like target someone that's like 91 years old just like that. It must be that his grandmother, his dad, they probably all used to complain about him. But he really comes for him in this book. He's always like blaming him. So many juicy details. Anyway, let me know your thoughts. Have you guys read the book? Do you like it? Do you want to read it? I think it's a very wholesome perspective to hear his side and just to understand that he's a basic Harry. He doesn't want to be pedestalized. He doesn't want to be, revered. He just wants to live his life and get $100 million or so dollars, but also wants to have his cake and eat it too, which is interesting. Either way, great read. Let me know your thoughts. Leave a comment down below. Don't forget to like, follow, subscribe, all the above. And I'm back. I'll see you in the next one. A peace.